Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Our next guest is Ayman Nassar. He is the founder of Islamic Leadership Institute of America, ILIA, and holds a diverse background in civic engagement, youth and family counseling and development, institutional governance, capacity building, technology and engineering, leadership and enterprise architecture. Over his career, he has managed dozens of highly complexity technology projects worth over $0.25 billion and led several programs in the fields of telecommunication, enterprise architecture, higher education, and youth programming. Brother Ayman is a passionate believer in the capacity of the youth and the ability to transform communities through the proper integration of youth into overall framework. Some of his most enjoyable times is spent working jointly with youth on various projects and in activities. He is known as Amu Ayman to many youth in the DC area and holds graduate degrees in engineering, management, system engineering, and electrical engineering, and over half of a dozen of industry certification in project management, system engineering, IT architecture, quality management, organizational excellence, and Six Sigma. Without further ado, Brother Ayman, tafadhal.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد خاتم الرسل النبيين. First of all, Jazakumullah khairan for inviting me over. MashaAllah, it's a wonderful event, and it's inspiring always to see the youth engaged, in defining the future and carrying the baton in the present. So, like Brother Qasim said, I come from an organization called Islamic Leadership Institute of America. We're located in Baltimore, near Baltimore in Maryland, and alhamdulillah, we've been around for about 3 years. We offer leadership training and development throughout the country, mostly on the East Coast. We haven't done anything on the west of the Mississippi so far. So inshallah, I was asked to talk about good governance and the role of youth. Obviously, this is a very big topic, so we can't do too much in an hour. But what we'll try to do is go over some key concepts, inshallah, for the young people, and then have some hands-on activities. So we've put on the tables some yellow sheets. Inshallah, you can take notes as we go through, because you're going to need it for the activity, inshallah, when we get to it, the latter half of this discussion. All right, so I'm not from Somalia, I'm from Egypt, but I'm really inspired. At least you guys have, for the 4th year, you've been doing a youth conference. We haven't done one yet, so mashallah, you're ahead of your game. I'd like to start with Surah Al-Asr, because it's a very, very important concept for us. And as the scholars say, if this surah was revealed only by itself, it would have been sufficient for mankind to be guided. And it's very relevant to the topic of today, and also what we're discussing, governance in particular. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by His creation of time. Wal asr. Indeed, all of mankind is in a state of loss. Innal insana lafi khusr. All of us are in a state of loss. That's the default. Illa alladhina, except those people who have 4 qualities. Alladhina amanu wa amilu salihat wa tawasaw bil haqq wa tawasaw bis sabr. So there's an element of belief to be successful, but that alone is not enough. The formula is success equals belief plus amilu salihat. They've done good deeds. So there's some work, there's some action. Like the brother who spoke before me said, you have to work hard. It's not just lip service. We can't say we are Muslimin, we are Somaliyin, we are Egyptians, whatever we are, and we sit back on the couch and watch the news. That doesn't work. But it takes hard work combined with patience. This is where the sabr comes in at the end of the surah, and haqq. It has to be done based on adl, on justice and fairness. So we can't just do, work that is hard work, but then in the process of doing this hard work with the good intention, we step on someone's toes and hurt others. We cannot do that. So the formula for us for success in general is belief plus work plus fairness, or haqq plus patience. So that is the formula for success. So this is pretty scary because a lot of us, sometimes we think that we're actually working. And it's relative. You know, how much is too much? That differs from one person to another. But we also know from the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا يكلف نفسا إلا وسعها. الله لا يكلف نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah does not burden a soul with more than what could carry on its shoulders. And we see around the world a lot of people, you know, suffering. People in Gaza, people in Pakistan, in Kashmir, throughout the world, right? And they're in very difficult situations. So for us, you know, living in this country, wherever we came from, we're in a very comfortable state. And we have a lot of resources at our disposal. So it's not just enough that we, you know, inshallah, the outcome of this conference, like one of the brothers mentioned, should be some action items and some work, inshallah, to be done. So today we'll talk about 5 key points, inshallah. And I'll try to be as brief as I could so we have more time for the 5th team activity. But we'll talk about what is governance at a very, very high level, you know, simplistic definition. Because again, governance spans multiple, as we will see, domains. We'll talk about why do we need governance? Why is this an important thing? Some common models of governance. Again, we'll keep it very high level. And some practical aspects that youth can get engaged in. So for us here in this room, we're all, you know, motivated and inspired to go back to our home country, to Somalia, and do some great work. But what's really practical and what's feasible? If I'm a 14-year-old kid, what can I really do if I go back in the summer, right? We've been hearing all day long today about, you know, going back and giving. So, inshallah, some ideas to get some work moving. So what is governance? And this is a, you know, definition that I've come up with. It's a system or a framework of managing and leading others and self through clear expectations. So the law tells us that if you go over 55 miles per hour on this road, you'll get a ticket. So there's a clear expectation that the limit is 55 miles per hour. If we go beyond it, we also understand what's going to happen. We understand that we will pay a ticket of $30. If we go, you know, another 10 miles, it's going to double and so on. So there has to be clear expectations to avoid confusion, which frustrates people and causes chaos, and people starting to fight. Because people get angry and they fight with each other when they feel they're not respected. And when do people feel not respected? When there's confusion. Most of the conflicts around the world is because of lack of understanding. We have an example, you know, just yesterday in Egypt, the president, you know, took some decrees and he gave himself, or the role of a president, certain powers, right? We're not here to say whether it's right or wrong, but there's obviously in the 80-some million people in Egypt, each person will understand it in a different way. And this unclear expectation will lead to some chaos and instability. The number 2 thing is policies, rules. And then we control these rules. We measure things. So just like you're driving on the highway, you know, the officer's measuring your speed. If you're 56, he might let you go. If you're 60, he might give you a warning. 65, he'll stop you. If you're 40, you're too slow. So we have to measure where we are in this framework. And the people measuring have to have some authority and power to enforce certain things. And then our roles and responsibilities have to be clear. So I call that care. Control, authority, roles, and expectations. So governance is about care, about those 4 key points. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, in 3 parts, talks about a concept called Quwama. And one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Qayyum. Al-Qayyum, the overseeing, the one overlooking his creation, taking care of his creation. So in one of those 3 locations, 2 of them are in Surah An-Nisa, the chapter of the woman, and one is in Al-Ma'idah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking to the believers, commanding them, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, kunu qawwamina bil-qist. O you who believe, be qawamin. What is qawamin? Qawamin has multiple meanings in English. It's a rich Arabic word, but it basically means be a guardian, be a supporter, be a responsible entity, be a caretaker. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word quwama الرجال قوامون على النساء. The men are قوامون over the women. And what does that really mean? It means these same things, that they're their guardians, they're protectors, they're caretakers. They govern the household. They make sure things are in order, expectations are clear, and so on and so forth. So this is an important concept for us as Muslims to understand, because it does relate to governance and how we govern our affairs. So some examples of governance, again, it's a wide topic, but could be in business. We have corporate charters, a mandate that says, okay, you can start a company. We have corporate bylaws, internal laws, if you will, that tell people, the directors of the company, how to run it. We have corporate policies and procedures. For nonprofits, they also have maybe a mission statement, bylaws, and so forth. Local jurisdictions have regulations and laws. And then at the state level, at a country level, we have market regulations. Who can sell what, where, and for how much. We have bureaucracy that defines how governments operate. We have partnerships, different branches of the government, the executive branch, the judicial, and so forth. And then even at the global level, we have treaties between countries. We have organizations like the UN that define certain ways of doing things, of conducting trade or whatever it is that's out there. And the definition of sovereignty of a nation or a country, these are all different types of artifacts of governance. So it could be at a micro level or a macro level, globally, or even inside our households, between the parents and their children. They set certain expectations. You're not to come back after 10 o'clock, or you're not to do this or to do that, and so on. These are just some examples of what a bylaws could look like, sections of different bylaws. So if we were to put a bylaw, and this is important for the young people, if you want to start something, you want to start a real project. So you have to put some rules to how you're going to operate. So take note of this. So inshallah, the bylaws is, again, a document that defines how your organization operates. You have to have a mission statement. As we saw the video earlier, right before the lunch, the why question, right? This is the mission. Why are we here today? I mean, yes, it's nice to meet new people and have, good time with each other and eat the wonderful food. But there's a bigger cause. There's a bigger passion in our hearts that brings us here together, is that we want to enjoy good and make our country better, make our youth successful, inshallah. So you have to have a very clear picture of the purpose of what you're doing, the service that you're going to provide. Who are the people who are going to be impacted? We call those stakeholders. Who are the people who are going to benefit from it? The people who are going to fund it and donate to it? The people who are going to sell goods to this organization? The people who will also, partner with you to help you do this work. And then some governing principles. For example, the levels of governance. Do you just have one top executive level and that's it? Or you have multiple levels? Is there oversight? And we'll look at some of that, inshallah. So roles and responsibilities have to be clearly defined. The terms and how often people meet and so on. The decision making. Who will make decisions? How? When? What is the criteria to say yes or no? That kind of stuff. And then contracts. If we have a dispute in our organization, how do we resolve that? Who's authorized to make that dispute resolved and take it to the next level? And then some definitions. What does it mean that we have a majority? If you have a board of 5 people, if your governing body is 5 people, what is a majority? Is it 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 5? Right? So you have to define these things. What does a conflict of interest mean, and so on. And then there could be some constraints depending on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to help education in Somalia and you want to start something here, that promotes education, you might be a nonprofit, then you have to adhere to some tax law that the IRS requires you to fulfill. Or if you're a business, you might need to adhere to some, corporate law, maybe regulated by the SEC or the IRS or some other state, level. Even the states have regulations that they have to abide by in front of the federal government. The state of Virginia or the Commonwealth of Virginia or state of Maryland, they have things that they have to, abide by in front of the federal government. And then we talk about, finally, you include, things like the oversight, who does what and oversees what part of the organization. So what is good governance? And this should be a no-brainer for us as Muslims. And subhanAllah, in the last 10, 20 years, you start to hear about this word more, in the literature, good governance. And for us, this is the default. This is what Islam brings to the table. This is nothing new. And we'll see some models of governance and how people now are moving towards this good governance. Just like, in Europe now they're talking about Islamic finance, that it's a fair model of finance and banking and so on and so forth. And because it's fair, it fulfills, the requirements of Surah Al-Asr. So there's good blessing in it, and it succeeds, it works. So for us, there's at least these 5 or 6 key points. The first thing is Iman. Going back to our understanding of our deen, we have to have Iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and do the job what we're doing to, for His sake so that it could be accepted, inshallah. So it's based on a framework that's derived in our case, from the Quran, from the Sunnah. And we hear the term Sharia, going around and so forth, but that's basically what it is. It is a system based on what is, sent to us through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through the Quran. And then number 2 is taqwa. Recognizing that what we're doing is being overseen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So no matter how many boards you put on top of each other, or how your oversight is, whether you have a prime minister looking over his cabinet and then the president looking over the prime minister and some other branch looking over these 3, if there's no taqwa, nothing will work. So at the end of the day, there is an element of trust and taqwa that has to exist for this whole thing to work. So again, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us over and over in the Quran, and the concept, the word taqwa means God consciousness, means purity of heart and intention to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, means protecting oneself from the hellfire. As the Prophet ﷺ said, اتَّقُوا النَّارِ وَلَوْ بِالشِّقِّ تَمْرَةٍ. Stay away from the hellfire even if it's giving away half a date. So taqwa has multiple meanings in the English language. And it's a very important concept when we talk about Islamic governance. And a good Muslim who understands properly taqwa will fulfill the obligations of all people that are governed by this model, whether they're Muslims or non-Muslims. Because again, it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so inherently it has fairness and justice in it. The third point is ihsan. Ihsan, which is perfection. Striving to be perfect in what we're doing. As the brother said, working extremely hard, but also smart to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to make sure that this piece of work is the best it could be. Next comes adl. Adl, one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is to balance things. Is basically in modern, management terms, prioritization. Is giving things the proper priority. So this is again a concept that the leader or the governing body has to have. How do I balance healthcare with education, with food and population needs and this and that and so forth? You can't just do one thing and not do the other because it's a very complex system. And then compassion. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us and tells the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we have sent you Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as mercy to mankind. So this governing body, when they're putting together a framework that people will use to run their lives, there has to be some compassion in it. It has to reflect on people's needs. It has to understand the nature of what they're living in. It cannot just be blindly out of a book that does not work or is very difficult to implement and tough on people. And then finally, we have to realize we need patience because things don't change overnight. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the one who says and it becomes. Kun fayakun. But yet, with His own wisdom, He created the heavens and the earth in 6 days to send us, a message. So again, we cannot expect that something will change overnight. Regardless if it's even on an individual level, someone who's failing their exams and they're trying to get an A, it's unlikely that we'll jump from an F to an A. But it's very likely we can jump from an F to a B. A B minus and then an A plus the next time. So again, patience is important for us as governors or governing bodies, understanding that things take time and it relieves us from stress. There are many other traits. We don't have time to go through it. But we can break them down if we're looking at a leadership framework based on the type or the style of leadership. If it's a goal-oriented, or if it's team-oriented, or whatever type of leadership style you're following. All right, so next we'll talk about, inshallah, why do we need governance? Why do we complicate things? Because if we don't, we will have chaos, just like that. We'll have people robbing each other. We'll have unemployed people. Down here you see a traffic circle. I mean, these are real pictures. This is in Cairo. You'll see traffic lights that show red, green, and, I don't know about Somali if you guys have that. But it's very common over there. All three, yeah. So governance is important. But even if, our streets were well maintained and all this stuff was working, we're living in a more complex world today. Healthcare is becoming very complex, everything. The supply chain, you order a product, part of it is made in China, part of it is in Thailand, part in South America, and it comes to you in a package and so forth. So in order for these things to operate properly and to continue to operate, which we call sustainability, you have to have some governing body. But the mistake that we quite often fall into is that we complicate things more than they need to be. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran has sent us a very high level guideline, abstract. This is how you manage your affairs. This is how you pay your taxes. 2.5% if you're over this much. If you got cash and gold and silver. If you got cattle and farmland, it's this much percent, and so on and so forth. But it's very simple. Now we can take that and complicate it and come up with volumes of tax code, which might work and might not work. But again, the point as Muslims, if we really want to do something unique and successful, we should not just copy from other systems. We can look at it, extract from it the good, like one of the brothers or speakers were saying earlier, and add to it what we know is simple and works. So another reason is that we're living in a complex world. A third reason is to make sure we're actually delivering and doing what we intend to do. So we intend to eradicate maybe poverty, but after a few years we might find ourselves not doing that. We're doing something a little differently. This chart is very common in the IT world, where you got a customer who wants something. This is what the customer really wanted, a wheel swing. But this is the way they explained it at the very top left. And then someone understood it in a different way. They explained it to another person a different way, and so forth. And at the very end, this is what the customer got, that root of the tree. So if we don't have a model that explains what we want and we can monitor things and follow it, we're going to lose track after a while, especially with the very complex nature of life today. You look at any country, all the systems are very integrated and intertwined. Healthcare and education and employment and industry, agriculture, right? If something goes wrong in agriculture, it affects health of the people. And if that goes wrong, it affects, the quality of the work and productivity, and education suffers, and taxes and all that kind of stuff. So for the youth, there's a lot of opportunity, and we'll talk more about that. But there's tons of things. Each one of us in this room has a passion for something, whether it's unemployment, world hunger, starvation, and so on and so forth. And this chart will never go away, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah Al-Rum, ظَهَرَ الْفَسَادُ فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ, that mischief and deviation has appeared on earth and in the sea. بِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِي النَّاسِ, by what the people's hands have earned, meaning the bad intentions and the bad deeds that they have accumulated. And He's doing this so that some of them, it's a punishment for some of them, and it's also maybe a benefit for others in this world. And it's a sign so that they may come back to the right path. So again, there's a lot of opportunity for us to get engaged. So inshallah, before we give this little break, and on your tables you can work on this, we want to remind ourselves about our mission. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the Quran, He says, "Kuntum khayra umma ukhrijat lin-nas." You've been the best nation brought out to mankind for 3 reasons. We enjoin good, prohibit evil, and believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So again, we see that notion of action and work combined with belief, both of them hand to hand. So inshallah, I'd like you to get together on your tables and think about 3 examples or 3 reasons in your local communities or your everyday life, where you feel that governance is missing in some way or another, and it's important. It's just three examples, inshallah. We can have probably 2 minutes for that, and then we'll continue from there. So inshallah, we want 3 examples of governance that you feel needs improvement in your local communities. We'll give you another 20 seconds, inshallah. Inshallah, we're going to ask for a volunteer to share with us what their table came up with.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah brother Ayman for this well thought talk. We came up with not only 3, but we came up 4 points. So based on the model that you gave us, والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. So we don't take faith from other people. I mean, everybody's a believer, so we are believers. But what we miss is patience, because we are not. Sometimes we try to do everything very quick and not waiting for the. And not keeping ourselves in patience when we do things, and also maybe we just assume and we have a doubt that we sometimes may miss sincerity. We are not maybe sometimes doing for the sake of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala what we do. And number 3, we said that we are also missing prioritization. Maybe we're not putting things in order. So these are the 3 issues. And also, Brother Omar, also we shared also the other issue that which is also lack of connection within the community. So there is no working that are going on within the community that helping one another and working one another and putting the issues in community-wise so that we can solve it if we see these issues rise in the community. So these are the things that we came up with. So maybe there are more.
We'll come back, Jazakallah khairan. That's perfect. So just for the sake of time, if we pick one of those, the patients, the first one you mentioned, if we were to go back to that early definition, what could be done in practice, where is it? Here. In practical steps to address the patience or lack of patience issue. So if you were a board of a masjid, right, you're the governing body, and you're trying to improve your governance model, and you're saying that, okay, we have an issue in the community, there's lack of patience. What could we do using these things, the expectations, the policies, controls, measures, all that stuff, to make sure that's resolved? Why are people impatient? Clarification, right. Information, right? You need to know what's going on? Gratification, okay, okay. So you want to feel good. Okay, you want to have it now. But why? Why do you want to have it now? Okay. Mm-hmm.
That is like a person to have many questions, so becomes impatient.
Right, exactly. Right, so those 2 points. So if we can address these two by giving people that information, which would gratify them, give them that sense of, okay, I know what's going on, in a timely manner, through setting some good expectations. So maybe you had an event, and now people left and they went home, but they don't know what happened after the event. So they become impatient. And then next time you say, come to the event, it's like, oh man, these people, they don't do anything. They never listen, right? I mean, we hear that all the time at the masjid or wherever we are. So maybe something the governing body could do is they institute a policy that says whenever we're doing some activity, we have to get back to the people within 24 hours. That's like a law. That's a rule. It's a policy. So now the whole organization has to adhere to that policy. They have to measure it. So next time they're doing an event, they say, okay, did we communicate out to people within 24 hours? Or no, it was 48 hours. Okay, so next time we'll improve, inshallah. That's where the measure comes. And they have the power and the authority to make these improvements. They have access, through their authority to the email system that they will communicate to the people or whatever they're going to be using. So that's just a simple, quick example, how to improve our governance models. Very small changes that could make, significant, inshallah, impacts. Type. We'll just have to go through this. It's because we lost some time. Type. Quickly, inshallah, models of governance. And I've chosen here a corporate model, again, because since this is a youth event, there's a lot of opportunity for young people to start businesses, non-profit or for-profit businesses, that can make a change in their local community and also across the globe. So you could start something here in the United States. Since you're living here, you go to school here, you have access to resources and people and so forth, and then you take some of that and share it with people, overseas. And you can start to see some actual, steps getting done. So we're going to look at this definition. Came up a couple of brothers. Their names are Chowdhury and Haq from this paper. And they define corporate governance from an Islamic perspective as a way to define and attain a set of objective criteria by means of understanding the relationships between different variables, in the corporation. The market dynamics, internal employees and what's going on and so forth, supported by certain policies, the programs of the organization, and some partnerships with other people outside. Okay? So this is how they define it. It's a little technical, but basically what they're saying in a nutshell, and then they added to it, making the maqasid al-sharia, the objectives of the sharia, of the Islam, the ultimate goal of the corporate governance. So if sharia is saying fairness and good products and good quality and so forth, then the governing body's intention and priorities should be a good product, not necessarily profit. Of course to make profit, but also to do it in a decent way. So these are common models. This one is called the Anglo-Saxon model. Basically you have some shareholders who have a board of directors that reports back to them, and they have a management team that basically runs the operations, and there's an employee or a group of employees working. The control mostly is in the management hand here. Shareholders have very little influence on what's going on every day. It's the management team, and their board of directors are sort of the ones in the middle that kind of tell the managers what to do to please the shareholders. But the shareholders are mostly passive. And then that improved over the years. We call it now the European model. And basically you have either like trade unions or some other third party that comes in to protect employees. So in the first model, it's a little bit oppressive for employees. They could work long hours because no one really cares about them. Everyone cares about the shareholders. We want to make the shareholders happy. So they brought in these trade unions. They brought in some other boards that could supervise, the board of directors and make sure things are balanced. So there's no fraud and there's no, personal interest and so forth. And then the two brothers came up with this model they called it Tawheed and Shura model. Basically, the idea is that Tawheed, or Islam, the Sharia, is, the episteme of everything in the governance model. So the adl, the ihsan, the taqwa that we've been talking about, the iman, is driving decisions that would govern this organization. They have a Sharia board, basically people who are knowledgeable in Sharia, right? They don't have to be, people with long beards, but they're people who understand Sharia. They might have dual degrees or whatever it is. And then there's a shura. This could be a board of directors. It could be whatever you want to call them, that consults with, this Sharia board for specific matters and questions. And then they work directly with the management team and the shareholders and so forth. But the key point here is that the focus is on the social well-being. So the perspective of a Muslim corporation or Islamic corporation is not money-making. In Islam, you really wouldn't have a for-profit and a non-profit. It would be one type of organization that makes money and also does good social well-being. Because there's nothing wrong in Islam to make money, right? The whole point is we need to make sure that we're delivering that good social well-being. This is the model that we use at Ilya. So we have an Imara, board of directors, that basically, decides what the strategy of the organization should look like. And they consult with the board of trustees, the Amana. These are scholars we go to for specific, questions. Can we do this type of event? We have sisters who will be out of town for so many days. What do you think about this? And they, research it and tell us, okay, we got a sponsorship from a church. What do you think we can do in this? These are simple, basic examples. And then we have a Nasiha board, board of advisors. These are subject matter experts in different domains. They could be Muslim or non-Muslim. We have an ethics committee that oversees the Imara, making sure elections and all that kind of stuff happens properly. The Amana board can supersede the Imara. They can dismiss them if they want. They can say you can't do this thing. But there's certain things they cannot do. They can't fire the board. They can stop their actions, but they cannot fire them. The ethics committee can also stop certain decisions, but they can't fire them. The Imara can't fire the Amana board either. They can appoint them, but they can leave only, for a reason or so forth. So this is basically, at a high level how we're structured. So key points, we'll focus on the Islamic side, is that, everything stems from the Sharia. The objective is to protect the interest of everyone, not just the shareholder, but any constituency that interacts with this organization, whether it's a neighbor, a supplier, a customer, an employee, a manager, a shareholder. And it has to be balanced. There has to be adl. We can't say because you're on the board of directors, then you have to work for free for the rest of your life. I mean, that's also not fair, right? We know Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, when he got the Khilafah, he went to the marketplace, and they told him, where are you going? He said, I have to earn a living. They said, no, we'll pay for your work. So that's basically, at a high level. And in Islam, we do have a multi-tier concept, where different oversights take place, but it could be flexible. And this is the beauty of our deen, is it's not one type of model or another, and it's not a majority necessarily wins. The leader does have certain responsibilities, and as such has the right to take certain decisions, because at the end of the day, in this dunya and the hereafter, that leader is ultimately responsible. So inshallah, what's relevant to youth? There's a lot of examples. Some of them are very obvious. Muslim student associations. MSAs are extremely important, component of our college campuses and the, Muslim community in general. They have access to, resources on their campus, to people and so forth. They could, combine efforts across campuses, across the country, and do many great things. So that's a way where some of our youth, the older ones, can get engaged. They can start these organizations. Youth-led nonprofits. How many here are familiar with what we call juvenile courts or teen courts? Yeah, teen courts are courts that are established, of course there's some regulation to it, by teenagers, and they deal with minor offenses, something minor at school that happened, but they basically act as a jury and a judge in a case that involves a young person. And it's very serious, and it's been working in multiple states. Youth courts, SGAs, sport tournaments, right? Establishing a sports tournament across a region or something of that nature. So there's a long list: activism, faith-based committees, outreach, and so forth. All right, so let's put things into practice. how can we make something happen? So first thing, we need to plan. We need to have an understanding of what is it that we're trying to do. So there's many problems in Somalia. We can pick one of them. We can say education. I want to improve the education of young boys or girls or whatever you feel is necessary in that society. And then you come up with a plan. Okay, how can I do that when I'm sitting here in Fairfax, Virginia, right? Or Minnesota or Wisconsin, wherever you live. So you need to have clear goals and objectives. Okay, I'm going to start a small nonprofit maybe that is going to collect certain or come up with certain basic curriculum that we can send overseas and let leaders in the different villages teach it to the youngsters. Or we'll come up with some simple model that they can run in a community center. Some technology, a CD they can pop in, and maybe a couple of mentors guide the youth or whatever it is. So you have to come up with some passion, idea, and a plan how to implement it. How to achieve those. So that's the steps, the procedures. And then what happens next? Okay, we've accomplished the curriculum. What next? What do we do with that? There has to be something. You have to have a vision. We call that a vision. Okay, 5 years from today, what is this project going to look like? You organize things. So you make things standard. Each time you want to do it again, you're doing it in the same way, and it's easy to do it. You don't want each time you write a book, you have to start from scratch. There's certain things that you want it to be already done for you. The cover, the design of the cover, how to change the colors and the title and so forth. So it's quick and easy. And then you set expectations for your team. You got a team of 4 or 5 people working on this project. Each one has a role. And you take it from there. You start to measure your impact. You say, okay, how did we do? We plan to do this book, in 6 months. Here we are, 6 months, we got a book, so we're doing good. Or, we're ahead of our game, or so forth. The point I want to make out of this slide is that we keep saying the youth are the future. The youth are really the present. I mean, they're sitting with us here. They're not in the future. They're here with us today. And they do complement what we adults bring to the table and what our seniors bring to the table. So none of the 3 groups can survive alone. If the seniors are not around, life will be also difficult. If the middle-aged people, the adults are not around, things will come to a halt. And if the youth are not around, we'll basically degrade after a while because we won't have any new ideas, there'll be no risk-taking, no new thoughts and so forth. So this is what the youth bring to the table when we talk about governance. They bring ideas. On our board, we have to have someone under 18. This is in our bylaws. Whether they perform or not, or they come up with ideas or not, is a different thing. But they have to be there. They have to attend the meetings. And alhamdulillah, they do come up with great ideas. As a matter of fact, the first 2.5 years, I was the minority on the board. Everyone was under 20, and I was like the old guy. Now things are changing a little bit. But they can come up with plans. They can tell us what works and what doesn't. We said we want to do this program this day. It's not going to work. And sometimes we don't listen to them, and indeed, it doesn't work. The youth can learn how to make decisions, how to take risks. Youth have this ability inherent in them to take risks. They like to explore things. They like to try out things. And that leads to innovation. They have a voice, and they should be able to vote. And we have lots of examples in our heritage. Mu'adh ibn Jabal was 16 when he was sent to Yemen, a young man. And the Prophet ﷺ asked him 4 simple questions. And he got the answer right. He said, khalas, then go ahead. You're on your way. You already know what you're doing. They can help us get a picture of what reality is. We call that baselining. Okay, today this is the reality of the youth, of the ummah, of what we're doing. And then we can come back and measure it a year later and say, did we make any changes or not? They can propose ideas, and they can learn from us and take that knowledge and share it with other people. So that's the point here about this slide, is that there's a lot of opportunity for youth to be involved and that they can bring a lot to the table. So inshallah, before we move on to the team activity, just want to see if there are any general questions, and then we'll get involved with this. No questions? I didn't put you to sleep, did I?
Whether it's the masjid or youth organization, sometimes when you think it's appropriate to have multi-roles as head of the organization for some reason is in a temporary basis. Is that okay, or management perspective or governance perspective, that's not good direction? I'm like, you talked about Morsi and what's going on in Egypt and grabbing part of the powers. There are reasons. So scholars of law, they are saying like he has legitimacy at this time to do this and this,
Right.
because of this and this in temporary basis. Is it possible to apply this in like other organizations, whether it's like board of the masjid or
Yes.
other organizations?
No, jazakallah khairan. Yes, it is possible, right? I mean, if you can apply it at a country level, and you definitely could apply it at a communal level, or it's just like a family, right? So, does the parent have the right to dictate certain things all the time? Well, no, it's not reasonable. We have Ibrahim alayhi salam, an example of the best prophet and messenger. He went to his son, you know, to consult him if he could slaughter him or not, even though he knows this is a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he's going to do it anyway, right? But yet, to show us that he had to consult with his son before he would take that action. So that tells us that a parent cannot be a dictator all the time and just say, do this, do that, and so forth. However, there could be times when the parent decides, no, we're going to do it this way, and I don't need to explain it. I'll explain it next week or tomorrow, for whatever reason. So again, the leader, the governing body, has the responsibility at the end of the day in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and in front of the people. Now, they might be able to share some of the reasons why they're doing things, and they might not be able to. And this is where the patience comes in. And as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us also in the Quran, that we should follow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Rasul, and the people who are in charge, as long as they're good people. You know, they're Muslimin, they're biased, and they're doing good things. Now, if we see them doing things deviating from the path, then yes, we can start to question. However, it should not be absolute. It should not be, like you mentioned, forever. So it is on a case-by-case basis. And this is the beauty of Islam, is that it's not a rigid system. It's not a rigid, it's not a, democracy. Democracy means what? Majority? I mean, it's a very vague term. What does it mean? If you're a leader, of 6 people, and one day they're all good people, and then, you're out on a trip, and all of a sudden, all 5 of them decided to do something that is completely against, Islam. Are you forced to just follow them because if it's a majority? No, if you're the leader, you can take the stand and say, no, I'm not doing this, and I either resign or you follow what I'm saying, right? And we have examples from the prophets and the messengers and so forth. Any other questions? Right, so inshallah, if you can, what we're going to do next, you can choose one of these 2 examples. What we want you to do is come up with a governance model or structure for either a youth organization that is dedicated to the betterment of girls ages 12 to 22. And I'll show you a short video. Anyone here familiar with the girl effect? Okay, so we'll show that video, inshallah. Or a youth managed and led technology business. So people who don't want to do nonprofit, that's fine. You can do also good work through a technology. Example is like a Facebook company, something like that. So how would your model look like? How would you govern this organization? We'll look at a quick video, inshallah. Right, so inshallah, we'll give you 5 minutes to come up with how would you, if you were to start an organization that would do work similar to this or something else, how would you structure that? Inshallah. And again, keep in mind, a little step here could make a big difference in someone else's life or millions of other people. So inshallah, work together on your tables, and then we'll have 1 or 2 groups come out and share what they have, inshallah.